It started with a chainsaw, not a letter, not a warning, not even one of those snarky HOA violation notes Karen loved to slap on my door. Nope. This time, she rolled up at sunrise, fresh latte in hand, clipboard under her arm, dragging a landscaper and two bored teens in neon vests along for the ride like she was leading some HOA parade that only she was excited about. I was barely awake standing in my kitchen when I heard a gas chainsaw, the kind that chews through anything and everything, roaring right through my mom's prized English heirloom roses. I ran outside in pajama pants and bare feet tripping through mulch, waving my arms like a crazy person. But it was too late. There in the morning sun, petals, shredded stems hacked, and roots yanked up by the dozen lay every memory I'd planted over 6 years. And Karen. She just looked at me with this smug half-smile, holding her clipboard like a badge of honor latte in the other hand. Not a drop of sympathy on her face. I didn't yell, didn't beg, didn't do anything dramatic, just stared at her. And as calm as I could said, "You just planted revenge." Let me back up for a second. I'm Leo Willow Creek Lane, the house with the backyard rose garden. That garden was therapy for me, you know? My mom passed away from cancer and we buried her ashes right under those first climbing roses. Every time I was out there pruning, blending soil, chasing off pests. Yeah, even those stubborn aphids, it was like talking to her again, keeping her close. For Karen, though, anything she couldn't control was an enemy. She ran the HOA like her own little kingdom, doling out fines for offensive towels, shutting down lemonade stands, because the fonts weren't HOA approved, acting like her job was keeping suburbia sterile and beige. My riot of roses, red, orange, gold drove her up the wall. I kept the garden neat, labeled, "Never let it get wild," but Karen still found reasons to complain. Said my flowers were attracting bees to the sidewalk, or the colors distracted drivers, or a rose leaned too far over the buffer. I complied, trimmed, sent her. My entire plant list, never got a reply. Thought maybe she'd gotten bored and moved on. Big mistake. That morning she claimed she had board approval to rip out my roses. Turns out no vote ever happened. She typed up a fake letterhead, bullied the landscaper, and called it enforcement. When I tried to talk to her, she just gave me this head tilt like I was a 6-year-old asking about taxes. Your flowers were non-compliant, Leo. This is just enforcement. She turned on her heel and marched off sunlight, catching her platinum bob like a villain in a stage play. The landscaper and those kids looked more sorry than she did. That night I stared at the blank patch of dirt from my kitchen grief rolling in like a storm, but beneath it something new started bubbling up. Not rage exactly, not bitterness, just a sharp, cold clarity. A couple days later I visited Jamie, an old college friend who's a botanist for the Department of Natural Resources. I asked her about a certain collection of plants. She just laughed. "I'm not helping you make a weapon, Leo." "Not a weapon," I said. "A lesson. A very educational lesson." Jamie grinned, and before I knew it, she was in. What I planted next looked innocent enough. Poison ivy with pretty white veining poison oak that could pass for fancy shrubs, stinging nettle hidden behind lavender and ornamental grasses. I didn't just throw it in, I designed it. To the untrained eye, it looked like a peaceful healing garden, but I knew every single spot that was more hazardous than it looked. My garden became a beautiful trap. Karen, of course, didn't notice at first. She was smug the first time she walked by. That's better. Leo much more muted. I smiled and offered her a closer look. She bent down, touched a leaf. Later that day, she showed up at the neighbor's book club, red-faced, scratching at her arms, muttering something about mosquitoes while slathering on antihistamine. Hope she's not allergic to nature, I thought. Every day I expanded the garden a little, shaped it into a heart. Neighbors said it was sweet. I made sure the edges flirted with the sidewalk, always just within code, and even set up a little bench for folks to enjoy it. Nobody suspected a thing. Not even Karen, who started getting more and more curious, bending down, taking samples, even snapping photos for her case. At the next HOA meeting, she marched in with her hands covered in bandages and printed photos of my garden demanding action. The board rolled their eyes, told her to get proof. All she had was a rash and a bad attitude. That meeting ended with her stomping out, swearing she'd handle it herself. Thing is, I knew she'd come back for more. Karen's not the type to admit defeat, especially not to someone she thinks should be following her orders. I installed a camera in the window and asked my neighbor Clara to share porch cam footage had every angle covered. Sure enough, Karen started snooping around at night. One time I caught her with gardening shears snipping at a vine, didn't know she'd just grabbed the meanest patch of poison oak hiding under a jasmine runner. Next morning, her arm's wrapped in gauze and she's wearing sunglasses to cover up the swelling. She called an emergency HOA meeting, accused me of endangering the neighborhood, waving her bandaged arm like a warning flag. I kept cool, slid my plant registry and approval emails across the table, offered the board a tour of the garden. They found nothing wrong, everything labeled, everything in compliance, even the roses starting to come back in the far patch. The board sided with me, even sent Karen a warning to stop her unsanctioned inspections. But Karen didn't quit. She doubled down, taping up flyers for a community garden inspection and beautification parade, trying to rile up the neighbors against me. Nobody was buying it anymore, but I played along. Set up the garden, sipped tea on the lawn, and watched as Karen led her little parade clipboard in hand, inspecting every planter like it was a crime scene. When she reached my place, she went through the whole song and dance, but the fake Latin names on my garden markers threw her off. Michelle, a new board member, even complimented my setup. Karen's face went beet red, but the neighbors just smiled and moved on. Pretty soon, word spread about the sting zone in my yard. Kids daring each other to touch the vines. Neighbors whispering stories about squirrels and secret warnings. Karen was losing her grip, getting more desperate, sneaking into yards, even scaring a toddler while hunting for contraband gnomes. The board started getting complaints about her instead. Still, she kept trying. Her last big move was hosting a brunch and including a garden tour of, you guessed it, my yard, without even asking. She set up chairs right on the toxic patch. By sundown, half her guests were covered in hives. Karen tried to blame allergen spores, but nobody bought it. The fallout was immediate. A guest, who was a real estate agent, filed a formal complaint, saying Karen's mess had cost her a sale. The board had enough. At the next meeting, Karen tried to push a rule to ban every plant except 4 boring species she'd chosen herself. The room was packed, neighbors for once united. Michelle stood up and pointed out how unrealistic and ridiculous the rule was. Mr. Carter, who keeps a bonsai forest, reminded Karen that her own yard used to have snapdragons not on her list. Someone in the back even yelled, "Or just flowers you don't like." That was it. The board shut her down fast, but they didn't stop there. Michelle had a folder with letters and photos from half the block showing Karen snooping in their yards at all hours, even in a bathrobe. One neighbor had notarized a letter about losing a property deal because of her. Karen tried to argue, but her voice cracked, and for once, nobody took her side. She was suspended pending review, and her emails started going ignored. Her lawn started wilting, her perfect house going to seed while the rest of us got busy living. I kept quiet, just tending my garden, sharing the occasional anonymous photo online. A dew-covered ivy leaf captioned, "Patient revenge looks good in the morning." And then Karen, desperate, filed a lawsuit dragging me into court for negligence and community endangerment. She showed up in head-to-toe sun protection with a pile of bad photos and wild stories, but I had evidence registries, camera footage, even letters from botanists saying everything I'd planted was legal. The judge saw right through her. Case dismissed, and a warning for filing anything else frivolous. The real twist came from Drew, a techie neighbor who compiled every sketchy email Karen ever sent showing how she'd faked approvals and bullied the HOA for years. He sent it to the board, and that was it. Karen was out. Her name erased her vote, gone her reign over. Michelle was elected president. Karen's house grew wild. Her name became a cautionary tale, and the block felt lighter, like a storm had finally passed. I got asked to join the new landscaping committee, so I started teaching people about soil pollinators, even poison ivy. My garden turned into a neighborhood stopover. Kids came by, people brought coffee, someone always wanted a cutting. I always told them, grow what you love, just make sure it doesn't bite the wrong person. Because no matter how many rules people try to write, there are always things they can't control. And the harder they try, the stronger what they fear comes back. 3 weeks later, Karen's porch lights stayed off. Her yard grew wild. No one saw her, no one much cared. The neighborhood felt easier. Kids played, someone strummed a guitar. People waved at each other again. My roses bloomed stubborn, brilliant, like they were fighting to take their place back. I kept the poison patches tucked away, not out of spite anymore, just as a reminder. Nature had taken care of the rest. One morning, there was a knock on my door. Karen, looking like the ghost of her former self, told me she was leaving. She didn't apologize, just said, "You won, Leo." Happy? I said. No, I wanted my garden back. She left, and within a week a new family moved in. Maya and Julian, both curious about native plants, eager for advice, instantly friendlier than Karen ever was. They brought banana bread, asked about compost, and hosted a block party that finally felt like a celebration, not a court hearing. At that party, Michelle raised her cup and toasted to surviving a dictatorship. Everybody laughed because we all knew it was true. Later that night, I set a bloom from one of my new roses on the spot where my mom's ashes rested. The chaos Karen planted had become the fertilizer for something better. People adapt gardens, adapt. And when you try to burn something beautiful down, sometimes all you do is help it come back stronger. As summer settled in, the block felt alive again. Porches, not fences, marked our boundaries now. I posted one last photo to the anonymous garden account, a wide-shot sunlight glinting on fresh blooms and lush vines. The caption, "Let beauty grow, but let it protect itself too." Karen tried to tear down my piece, but all she did was plant the seeds of her own downfall. And every time someone walked by, admired a flower, or shared a story, I knew the real legacy was still blooming. Now tell me, was I wrong to fight back, or did I just play the game by the same rules she wrote? Leave your thoughts below, and let's hear how you'd handle a neighbor like Karen.